thank you. I want to say thank you to Alexander for inviting me here. Very, very exciting. I live in New York City, and it's very exciting to come to Russia. I spent 4 days in St. Petersburg, which is the most beautiful city, amazing art and architecture, and then, yeah, phenomenal. And yesterday we arrived by train to Moscow, and it's an amazing, amazing, amazing city. We hear lots of stories about Moscow in America, and in all the movies it's always raining or cold, and it's always a lot of bears around, but it was nothing like that. It's a beautiful city. Okay, let's see if this works. That's me. But everything, I'm going to show you a lot of work, but these are some of the people who have worked for me since I joined Pentagram about 12 years ago. And there are a few others that interns and other people I can't remember. I'm from England, as I said. This is my queen. But for over 25 years, I've lived in this wonderful, wonderful place called New York City. So I'll tell you a little bit about New York. This is a famous magazine cover from the 1970s by a wonderful artist called Saul Steinberg. And he talks about, let me see if this works. Does it work? Well, he talks about, this is a joke, this is a classic joke about New York, how New York is obsessed with itself. We think it's the capital of not just the United States, which actually it's not. Washington, D.C. is the capital, but in our minds we think it's the capital of the United States, but also the capital of the world. Everything centers around New York in our minds. So you can see there's a picture of New York in the foreground, and then there's United States, which is just represented by some rocks. Canada there, Mexico there. Doesn't really matter, not important. And then the rest of the world, and there's Russia. So that's New York in their head. It's all about New York. So I used to be, before I joined Pentagram, I was the design director of this magazine. Very, very, very fun magazine. We did a piece about New York and the arrogance of New Yorkers and how we think we're so special, and we don't think we're like the rest of the United States. So there was this story, this idea that comes up occasionally that New York should secede from the United States, so it becomes its own country, because we're not like them. So we did this CGI, this computer rendering of Manhattan, the island of Manhattan, which is the main part of New York City, pulling away. There's a little tugboat there pulling away from the United States. And again, the United States is just represented by some icons. So this was our updated version of the old illustration. So we made ourselves some passports, very important, using the font Gotham, which is a very New York font. And then we made ourselves a currency. So I was wondering, when I was going through this morning, I was wondering, you know, how many people know Woody Allen and what he represents. And we did another bill, and I'm wondering whether this person means anything to you guys. Some of you, great. This is Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York, and he's now Donald Trump's lawyer. So, anyway, we won't talk politics. So, a little bit about Pentagram. This is a movie that was made 10 years ago. But Pentagram is a very unique company. It hasn't really changed in its model and its idea since it was formed in the late 60s and technically called Pentagram in 1972. So this is a very old movie. This was our old office in New York. We've since moved from this office a few months ago. But if the story of Pentagram and how it works is still accurate. So I hope this goes, yeah.
I usually describe Pentagram as having a kind of socialist capitalist model where partners manage their own teams and profit centers, and then we share profits equally.
What's great about Pentagram is somehow the structure has fixed it so that the people really are important. I mean, if you look at our letterhead, there are no slogans. It doesn't say, you know, fine design since 1972. It doesn't say what our disciplines are. It doesn't say graphic design, architecture, digital design, product design. The only thing it says outside of the name Pentagram, the address, are the names of people.
Pentagram exists for the partners to do the work they want to make, the way they want to make it, and that's what the platform's all about. You can use the resources, you can collaborate, you can use the shared intelligence, you can ignore it all.
I'm running a relatively small team, but I have this organization behind me that allows me to approach bigger clients, and that makes me visible to bigger clients, which is beautiful.
There's no managing partner, there's no home office, and those are questions we get a lot, like what would the home office think about this, or where's the head guy or something, and the answer is always no and no.
What is it, 5 offices and 18, 19 partners. Partners retire, new partners come into the mix, and it's a constant process of renewal.
If anyone ever asks, what's your 5-year plan or 10-year plan to Pentagram? Well, the answer, in my view, is who's the next partner. That's, you know, worrying about who the next partner is really what our business plan is about. Because if you get that right, everything else follows.
The system I'm just working on at the moment, just trying to finish off, is the actual poster for the Pentagram talk at D&AD next month. And the idea behind it is I've taken the P from the Pentagram logo, it's a modern 20p, and I've chopped it up into 18 different pieces, each piece sort of symbolically representing each of the partners. And the idea is that they come together in a variety of forms and create a single piece. But they're about movement and change, and but they help together at this central idea.
Okay, so that was all movie. Thank you. So this is just a sort of quick show reel of some recent projects, and Pentagram is an interesting company because it is now 21 partners. Each partner has their own group of designers and do their own projects. So collectively, we do a lot of work, and it's very varied, and it's kind of fun. We do tiny projects, we do huge projects. And I'm going to show you a couple of case studies done from my team. First one is Make a Park. Okay, so I just went through this presentation and added a couple of thoughts at the beginning. So the nice thing about being a partner at Pentagram, we're a big company. We do identities for American Express. We do Citibank. We do big MasterCard, big clients. But we're also, because we run our own companies, we can do whatever we want as well. So we can do free things. And to our team, to our soul, it's very important to us to do free things that are fun and for good causes. So this was one project that came to me via someone I knew who said, would you help us? We have an idea. There's an area of land in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. There are all these oil tanks here, and this area is going to become a park. The city's going to make it a park, but we have this idea. We want to keep these oil tanks. And this guy on the left, Zach, he actually lived in that building. He was a photographer, he was squatting there, and he lived there several years, and he didn't want these buildings to go, these oil tanks. He said that these are quite special, and the idea that is becoming much more popular in cities is this idea of industrial reuse. So instead of tearing down old buildings, you convert them into being relevant and useful for now. So the idea is to keep these tanks, which are really quite interesting, and in these tanks have exhibitions, performances, concerts, you could grow things in there. So they worked with an architect, Jay Valgora from Studio V, to come up with a concept for this park. And they've been working for 4 years now to try to make sure the city doesn't tear this all down. It hasn't been successful yet, but they are making progress. So they asked us to do an identity and a website and some communication. So these are other parks in New York City. This one at the top here, the H, that's the High Line. If you've ever been to New York City or read about New York City, it's a similar idea. It was an old railway track, an elevated railway track that the city wanted to tear down, but they kept it. And after a long campaign, they kept it and built a park on it. And it's one of the most successful parks or tourist sites in the whole of New York City. It's incredibly successful. So this is a similar idea. So this was a recent project for a park in Brooklyn by some very good designers called OCD. But we didn't want our park to look like this park, because our park was about, they wanted to keep the spirit of this place in Williamsburg, which used to have a lot of manufacturers there, and they wanted to bring back crafts and maker spaces and tech and all things like that within this park. So we thought about it, and a couple of sort of pieces of inspiration we had. One was that we wanted it to be super lively. We didn't want it to look, we didn't want it to look like, that was meant to go back. Didn't want it to look like a sort of yuppie park. We wanted it to be really sort of active and young. And we also were inspired by this kind of, what we call fugly graphics, that was just part of the youth and what was going on the internet, and you've seen all of this, emojis and all this. So that was our inspiration. So these were a couple of the logos we developed. We did this little animation. So this is the idea of this color palette and this kind of a little stupid, little bizarro. And in the end, we came up with this logo, Make a Park, which is obviously a little bit ugly and a little bit stretched, a little bit wrong. And then developed this whole sort of pattern, whole suite of patterns. So this was a flyer we did for them that animates, some little posters, and some mock-ups for some crazy things, t-shirts. This was the website, which was kind of a lot of fun. This project is now, it's still alive, but they're going to change the name of it, so we have to come up with a new logo. It's called The Tanks. So, but we'll keep the spirit of it, and but it was a fun project, and it was free. We lost a lot of money, but it was good. Okay, there's the timer. Okay, here's a project that was nearly free, but it wasn't quite free. The interesting thing about this project was it kept coming back for 6 years, and every time we learned something and did it a little bit better, I think. Well, not every time. So October is, as you see, it's a month-long festival about architecture in New York City. It's actually in October. There are activities, programs, exhibitions, all in New York City, run by the Center for Architecture in New York City. So we came up with this logo, and this was the first set of communications we did. Very, very simple, deliberately referencing Massimo Vignelli and this kind of Swiss type of European minimal design, but quite strong. The director wanted to use this color, she called it mango, this color, sort of orangey yellow, and that was it. We did a calendar. There was something happening every day of October. There were some posters, a little bag. There's a little exhibition space, tiny exhibition space, where we were promoting this idea, this concept of October. So again, no budget, very low budget. We had this idea of a calendar. So every day you could pull off this calendar. So that was sort of the big, one of the big visual ideas. Okay, next year, number 2, Every year we didn't know whether it was going to happen again, but they just decided, okay, we'll do it one more year. So you see the number 2 in the background. This is the different idea. This was in the exhibition space. This was very big, full wall, like you can see. So every day that blue arrow moved forward. So that's interesting. Huh. Number 3, the idea of a triangle. So we started to do these little animations for their web promotions, for the ads. That was the space, the front window, the wall. Each day of the week had its own sort of, almost like a post-it note, and they could fold it when the day had passed. So that was a big idea for that. Number 4, something quite sort of architectural and almost like a street plan. We drew the number 4 out of almost like roads in Manhattan on the grid. Some ads. Okay, so this was the way we did the calendar. We basically had these sort of doors, and we had 1 through 0, and then we just added a door or changed the doors every day. So the calendar was done by these kind of big doors. And then this was a really popular thing, which we kept after this, where every day had its own postcard. So you read the sort of what was happening that day, and if you thought, oh, I'd like to go see that film, or go see that building where they have a tour, or go see that exhibition or lecture, I pick up this card and save it. So they were very popular. So number 5. Okay, so that was the 5 device. We wanted to make this out of neon, but they didn't have any budget. So the postcards remained. And they had a second space this year down at the seaport. So we did this extra space for them. The cards were put on this different format. And then the last one we've done, this was an interesting collaboration. We collaborated with these wonderful architects, SoftLab, and this was a learning to me, because this one's the best, in my mind, so much better. So the idea here is that if you work with great people and collaborate, you'll get a better result, rather than us trying to be architects. So this was the motif, and this is a mathematical formula of 6-sided shapes that all sort of tessellate together. So this was fun, sort of graphically. This is the website, so as you move the mouse, it was responsive to that. There's a little bit of fun. So it's kind of, weirdly organic. But the great thing is when we worked with SoftLab, who took that into 3 dimensions. So, and the postcards still remain. And we got this wonderful space, and the logo got sort of wrapped into this and broken into these shapes that became 3D. It was a lot of fun. Get these beautiful views. Okay, so now for something less cool, but made more money. So whenever we give these talks, we show our cool projects, our fun projects, but the reality is a lot of what we do is not for arts organizations, it's not, for cool parks and things like that. It's for real businesses and real institutions. And I actually like doing these projects in some ways just as much. It's a different audience, it's a bigger audience. This project was for the American Academy of Neurologists. So there are thousands of neurologists in the United States, and most of them, if not all of them, belong to this academy, and they read journals like this. I'm not going to read that. So these are neurologists, they deal with the brain, they're doing very serious work. It's really important to me that what they read is very well designed and clear and legible. It's not about being trendy, it's the opposite of being trendy, it's about being functional. So this is their cover, and sometimes these projects are a little bit frustrating because you have ideas of making it better for the audience and more engaging, but the client can be quite conservative, especially a client like this, which has a large board, many stakeholders, meetings with 20 people in the room. There are decisions that will take months You know what this is about, I'm sure. So this is what this journal looks like. It's not a magazine. We've designed other magazines for them, but this one's the real hardcore information, right? When it's about learnings about diseases, right? This is very boring. If anyone wants to take a nap, now's the time. Okay. So we redesigned the interior. So we just cleaned it up, okay? We made it more legible, we used better fonts, but it's still, you can carry on sleeping. Just worked a little bit on the charts and the information design and just the hierarchy. But the interesting opportunity was the cover. So we gave a lot of directions. The first one was the safe one. This is what we thought they would probably end up with. So this is a gold, printed in gold. The trouble with gold, printed, as you probably know, is that it really looks brown and it looks shitty. It doesn't look good. You put it on the web, it looks even shittier. Okay? It just doesn't look like gold. In their mind, it's like, oh, we have gold cover, it's beautiful, but it looks terrible. And then they have their logo in the background. So we said, okay, what if we just clean it up? Take out the crap, organize the type, and just, at least it's clean. At least they can access the information without the mess. And then we said, what about if it's just white? Forget the gold, it doesn't work. Direction 2, it's like, okay, what if you don't have the table of contents on the cover, but just on page 1 inside? And what if we use a conceptual illustrator to illustrate these medical issues? Like the one on the right is about neuro-ophthalmology, so it's about the eye. So we get the illustrator to work with the eye. So what about we use photography like this, which is sort of like art photography. So it feels like neurons, feels like the brain. What about we use this sort of abstract photography, which is actually aerial photography? This is some beautiful work. Or what if we use conceptual art like this, which is all evoking the brain and what's going on in your brain? Or more kind of conceptual photography. Or what about we can combine the two? So you still get your gold cover, or maybe we use green, because green is the color of the academy. And then we have a little bit of that abstract art, just so the doctor, when he gets this in the mail, it's a little bit more beautiful. So in the end, they selected this direction, and we were shocked. We're like, really? So we developed this a little bit, and what we did is this is a real cover, we turned the gold into a yellow, which is more of a golden color. It has a much more uplifting spirit. So that was the new gold. This yellow, we called it gold, we just told them it was gold, but it's really yellow. We said, this is your new gold. So everything, keep this gold. So work with this wonderful illustrator in London who did all these. So this is about the spinal cord, behavioral neurology. So some of these are conceptual. There's about headaches. Yeah, you see, you get the idea. So this took months and months and months, over a year to get approved. They loved it, and they still love it, and they're doing it. So we basically do it for 3 years. So 3 years of covers, because this is the last 3 years they did, and then they repeat them again. So this is before, and this is after. So hopefully So they love this. They're in love with it. So they're making things. They're making T-shirts. They're making bags. They're making so it's a really good result. Okay, the last project is in 3 pieces. This is quite a long one. I have 23 minutes left. Okay, should be good. So this is my little message here. Do nice things for your friends, and sometimes it turns out really well. So. I have a friend who's a photographer, Graham McIndoe. He's about my age. He moved to New York a year before me. He's from Scotland. Really lovely, lovely man. He grew up in a very rough part of Scotland, very blue collar, and he became a punk rocker at 13 or whatever, obsessed with punk. Him and his friends. would go to every punk concert, and he saved every ticket, every poster. He was a photographer even back then. He took pictures backstage from the concert. He just always was upset. He's an obsessive kind of person. So he started posting these on Instagram, all his old photos and his old tickets and posters. And he also took his collection of tickets and albums and singles and rephotographed them in an interesting way. And it was a personal project. And I said to him, "You've got to do a book about this." And so we did this book, very low, small book, low print run, just for friends and collectors. So this is him. That's his bedroom. So you see, he was obsessed. All that along the right-hand side, those are the tickets he saved. That's him and his friends. You can see what kind of world they lived in, burning a mattress or something. So that's him on the left at a concert. And so concert picture, and then that's one of his new pictures, rephotographing. So these are just really someone my age who grew up in that world. I was like, this is so cool. So we did this book. Susie and the Banshees. This was one of the first ever New Order concerts he went to. So, okay, so this turns into, it's a bit of a long story, it turns into this project for the band The National. Has anyone heard of The National? Okay, a few of you. It's interesting, they are a huge band. They're probably the largest alternative or indie band in the United States, for sure, at the moment. But it's interesting, I talked to some people, they're like, ooh. And then other people are like, they're my favorite band. So I didn't know whether they're known over here very well. They did a new album, came out last year called Sleep Well Beast. So this is the band. They are now bona fide rock stars. They play venues, massive venues, much bigger than this. This guy is Scott Devendorf. He's the bassist. He used to be a graphic designer, and I used to work with him. He was the junior designer, and we used to make fun of him because he'd come to work with his bass guitar, and then he said, I'm going to go to band practice, and we just like, yeah, okay. So then he started playing in these tiny clubs in New York, Arlene's Grocery, you know, about that big, tiny, and we'd go there and go, all right. So we just thought he was just another kid playing in a band, and it would all go away. But slowly, they kept at it. And then they were, a few years later, they were supporting REM. And then now they headline huge festivals. They are finishing their tour. They went to, all over Europe. They've probably been to Russia. I'm sure they've been to Russia. They've been all over Europe. They go to Asia. They fly back and forth. They're a huge band now. So this is Scott. When he worked he wasn't my assistant, but I was a senior designer, he was a junior designer. That's me. The guy on the right is Abbott Miller, who was the boss at this company called Design Writing Research. Abbott is now a partner at Pentagram. So this is The National, this is what they do now. So they had this concept for an album. They hadn't done an album for 2 years. They're a really intellectual, serious band. They're a little bit political. So this was, the brief was very vague and amorphous. And I was working a lot with Scott, who would just bring me a reference and say, I saw a show about beat poetry in Paris. I wanted to feel like that. We also worked with Matt Berenger, who's the lead singer, who also used to be a designer, more of a web designer. And he has his own, hundreds of ideas, so many ideas. But it sort of boiled down to this, that they wanted to do something political and social. That's obviously liberal. They're a very liberal band. They played benefits for President Obama. But they wanted it to be a bit idealistic, futuristic, mystical. It's like... So one of the band members lives upstate in New York, about 2.5 hours north of New York City, and they built this barn. And this barn is their recording studio. So they said, we love this barn. This is where we do, they do a lot of work virtually. They're all traveling on doing their different projects, but they put it together here. This is where they do their final sort of mixing and playing together in this wonderful barn. So the barn, the idea was the barn would become the focus, this idea of a headquarters for their propaganda. and everything they produced. So they had ideas of almost making this social organization in theory. I told you it was kind of complicated. And then they said, why don't we make a corporate identity for this institution? Okay, so it's kind of a little bit of an in-joke, because they're meant to be the indie band, they're meant to be the alternative band, and they end up coming to Pentagram to do their identity. So it's kind of a silly joke. So it starts off with this barn. Graham, the photographer who did the punk, shot this barn, has been shooting this band, because mutual friend with Scott Devendorf, been shooting this band for, I don't know, 18 years or something. So this is the corporate identity we did. It was kind of a joke. We didn't make this was all fake. But we did do all the work. We did choose the color palette. We did make this NTL logo with the little barn as the full stop, as the period. So that's the back of the CD. It's the packaging. The nice thing about today is vinyl is back, as you hipsters probably know. You'll probably collect vinyl now, but it's big in the States, and we do limited editions and collector's editions and white vinyl. This is what I grew up obsessing about when I was a teenager. That's how I got it, how almost all of my friends got into graphic design. We loved music, because you do at that age, and then you love the packaging. So this was such a pleasure to be able to go back and do something like this at 12 inches scale, as a square format. And then this was the inside, which was like a poster with all the lyrics and the liner notes. All this photography is by Graham. We sort of treated it in this Rizzo technique. This website was done by another friend, but again, using our elements. The firm called The Collected Works. They're a really small, very cool website design firm in New York City, so you should look them up. So this is the website, this is all the tour dates. Simple site, they did a great job, but totally using the consistent graphic language. So it was really starting to be a big corporate identity with the print, with the web. They did a lot of promotion. This is Times Square. They worked with another mutual friend, another artist. So when you're very young and have friends, they go on and do really interesting things, and it's lovely when you can come back and collaborate. So Casey Reese is a digital artist, started off as a graphic designer, friends of the band from years ago. He did some of this really interesting film work that was used backstage in some of their shows, or on the stage as a backdrop. We did billboards in Los Angeles and Brooklyn and Denmark, I think that bus was. Posters. This is in London. So the interesting thing is, you do these huge scale things, but really, what's really important is Spotify. So we had to make sure these worked like this big on Spotify. So that's kind of a new kind of challenge, as you guys know. T-shirts. There they are. This was part of the joke of making this like an institution and having these really sort of bad products, or sort of cheap office products. That was their idea. We never actually made those, but they look cool. We did make some tape. So this is, we went to see them play. See, there's Scott. It's me. I'm a famous person. So, because this is a really, really important band, I don't know if you can read this or see this. This was when it was launched. It was sort of the first single was launched, and people saw the logo, and it was very well received. Okay. So we were nominated for a Grammy. We didn't win. So that's like the Oscars for the music business. The band were nominated for their category for Best Independent Music Album of the Year, and they won it. We were nominated for the packaging. We did not win it. So that's Graham, that's the photographer. That's me. That's my team. So we had to do all this red carpet photography. This is on Getty Images. Nobody has bought this image, not even my mother. But it's fun. So that's Andrea and Eliana and the team who did all the work. So then they did this homecoming concert back to their own town in Ohio, and we did this additional little identity for them coming home, it's called. So we turned that into an arrow and made the logo do that coming home. So it's just a little bit more extension of the project, which is fun. So they made these blankets. And finally, I might finish early, which would be a bonus for you guys. The photographer has done, as I said, has been photographing this band for, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 years. Started off just as a friend, and they were doing their own little CD, they were doing their own CD, so they needed shots of the band, so he did it as a favor. All these kind of things you do for free, for friends, can turn out, if you're very lucky, and believe me, we realize we're very lucky, to be able to work with these guys who are a very lovely client. But so he had this collection of photography. They were doing this homecoming tour, so from the town in the middle of America where they came from, it's a big deal that they're coming home to do this big concert. And the museum there said, why don't we do a small exhibition of the photography that Graham has taken of you guys over the years. So that's Graham with the whole band, Graham. So these are just some of the photographs he's taken over the years. And he's a great, great, great photographer. He studied painting in Glasgow, I think, or was it Edinburgh, and then went on to the Royal College of Art and did photography, and then moved to New York about 27 years ago, and has been shooting wonderful portraits for The Guardian, and a lot of editorial work as well as some advertising work. So just spending time with these guys year after year, he's come up with some really lovely images. So we did this catalog for them. So this is actually a tabloid newspaper format. And it's kind of fun to see the images when they were very young, and they look very sweet. And then there are images of, they all had hair there. Not so much anymore. So there's the barn. And there's some concert shots and behind the scenes shots. That was the thing. That was it. So work hard and be lucky. We've been very lucky. Thank you very much.